Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam, and joining us today is our special guest for not just all things Notre Dame football, but also just talking about college football in general, Joe DeLeone. He's a very respected analyst, covers Notre Dame football on Bleacher Report, and also has his own show, the Joe DeLeone Show, where he is co-host with Blake Ruffino, and they talk about all things college football. So before we get started here, I just want to encourage you to give Joe DeLeone a follow on Twitter, give the Ruffino and Joe Show a follow, and also if you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and share this video around to any fans who you think would enjoy this segment. But we're going to be talking about Notre Dame entering 2025 because the Irish finished top 2 in the polls after a brutal loss to Northern Illinois, a loss that almost is in the back of my head. I almost forget it in a certain way because of how successful the postseason was. Notre Dame is flying high. They have a lot of momentum, and they're a team that I personally am high on entering 2025. So, Joe, if you wouldn't mind, what are your thoughts on the 2025 schedule, which was just released last night, and how do you assess this roster compared to other rosters? Is this one championship caliber? Like, is it toward the top, or are there areas where they are lacking?
Yeah, first of all, I think the schedule sets them up for a favorable path to return to this college football playoff field. They have opportunities early against Miami before anything can go wrong for Miami. Obviously, I say that jokingly, but early in week 1 against Miami to build momentum, to build up their resume. They get to host Texas A&M, which this should be a big bounce back year for them. And then they got a lot of other scattered opponents on the rest of their roster, or sorry, the rest of their schedule that I think will just allow for them to point to and say these were quality opponents. This past year, it was very quick for a lot of people to point out outside of the NIU game that they hadn't played anyone. That was true. I think Syracuse this upcoming year is going to be really competitive. I think that getting to take on Arkansas is going to be a nice opportunity for them to show that they are better than the likes of the middle to the back end of the SEC, despite a lot of SEC fans not wanting to admit that. But this roster, there should be high expectations. They had the best young core in the sport, and I specifically mean freshmen. We saw Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and the contributions they had. Kingston Viamoasa and Drake Bowen at linebacker. Drake Bowen apparently is going to spend less time focusing on baseball and is going to commit more fully to football, which is huge. Their offensive line, bringing back Anthony Knapp fully healthy, Charles Jagasaw fully healthy, Emil Wagner. That offensive line is going to be really good despite losing a couple guys to the portal because there are some young up-and-comers that are going to be fantastic. And, of course, the running back duo of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are going to be the best running back duo in the country coming into the 2025 season. The only remaining question mark, and this is one that can make or break teams, this is something at the very least has a good situation to step into. And I'm, of course, talking about the future of the quarterback position. This is one of the few times with the quarterback room at Notre Dame and also in just the sport in general where there's 3 guys. There is not a clear player at the top that is leading the pack, in my opinion. I think that Steve Angeli provides a high floor. I think that Kenny Minchie supplies a high ceiling. And CJ Carr, who is going to be a redshirt freshman, he has the bright future ahead of him of maybe getting him into the mix as soon as possible and seeing how things progress. Riley Leonard was great, and he had the instincts, as we saw in the final stretch of the year, that helped boost them and carry them to a national championship and almost to the point where they had a little bit of a comeback. But they need a different style of passer, I think, in Denbrock's system to take that next step and to eventually win a national championship.
I would agree with that. I know that obviously Denbrock had to trim part of his offense to tailor it to the specialty of Notre Dame and the fact that their receiver room wasn't quite what LSU's was in 2023. Obviously, the quarterback position wasn't either. But I do think that they have some talent at wide receiver. The O-line should be wonderful. The running backs will be even better. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, we saw Angeli for that one series in the Orange Bowl, and he looked like a better passing quarterback than Riley Leonard, right?
Yeah, and that's something that provides a little bit of intrigue. And he's a Jersey guy. He's not far from where I'm from. He went to Bergen Catholic. He's very highly regarded in this area. To me, he's like the type of guy that's perfect for a backup quarterback at any level, where you were able to bring him in that situation, and the floor of the offense was just so high. Like he was able to connect and find a lot of his receivers in order to create plays. All that stuff was able to open up pretty quickly for them on that drive. But we saw some of the limitations. He's lacking experience. He doesn't really have the pocket awareness, as he almost got strip sacked on that situation in the Orange Bowl. I think at the very least, Notre Dame fans should feel good knowing that if Kenny Minchie's not ready and CJ Carr definitely isn't ready, if it comes down to that, they're at least going to have a really steady option. This isn't going to be like Michigan this past season. Don't mean to throw the stray in there.
No,
This
you're
is going to
good.
be like Michigan this past year, where it was, man, who the hell are they going to trot out there? And they were just throwing whoever they could and hoping it was going to work.
Yeah, it was horrible. And you do not want that. You do not want that because they wasted a lot of talent consequentially. For Notre Dame, defensively, I know they lose all starting four defensive linemen. I know they lose Jack Kaiser, the graduate, too. And also, obviously, Xavier Watts. And then Benjamin Morrison got hurt, but he's off to the NFL. Who do you think are some players who will step up in those positions? And will there be any upgrades over those departures from the new players?
Well, I think Benjamin Morrison was great, and right now he has a first-round grade for me in the upcoming draft. Um, but there obviously were some limitations with his play strength and his durability. I think that Leonard Moore, who stepped in, and the way that he finished the year, he wasn't giving up any separation. Like he was unstoppable. He had a great national championship game too. I think everybody was so focused on Christian Gray's failed last play that we forget that Leonard Moore is a true freshman, a former 3-star, played as well as he did. I think that maybe that Leonard Moore is not maybe the same type of athlete as Benjamin Morrison is. I'm not going to say that that's a direct upgrade, but Leonard Moore, knowing what he could do early on, I think that Notre Dame fans are pretty excited. Adon Schuler's not a direct replacement for Xavier Watts because he was playing a different role, but Notre Dame fans also should feel pretty good about Adon Schuler and the way that he was able to force turnovers and make big plays and impact the game as a tackler. I think that Notre Dame has been so well recruited at all these positions that they're putting guys at, like tight end Mitchell Evans is gone. Eli Raridan, who's a massive human being who I think could eventually become a go-to option in that offense. There's a lot of really easy turnaround. And that was what made Notre Dame so good this year, is that they had depth and they're not really losing any of that depth. A lot of the guys that entered the portal were not really in the mix to eventually start next season.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're only losing second stringers or third stringers, and then they're recruiting good sizes in terms of like body type, but also more so what I meant is like class. Like they're bringing in a lot of bodies, they're
Yep.
recruiting at a high level, and they're also developing at a high level. And I think that all those things blended together gives you a team that can win it all. And I think what some people sometimes forget is this isn't the 2010s anymore. This is the 2020s. And the formula for winning in the 2020s is great defense, depth, trench play. You're deeper than everyone. Not even necessarily you're faster than everyone. You're bigger, you're better conditioned. Like the two Georgia teams, Michigan, this Ohio State team, it was their defense that gave them a lot of help to win the national title, and their tackling and hard hitting. And I think that Notre Dame, I mean, I have them as high as number 2. You said pre-show that you had them top 5. I think that that first game against Miami is going to be a big test, as it would be for anyone, but ultimately they're going to be in a good position to win it all and play, at least play for a chance to win it all, compete for the college football playoff. What do you think is the hardest game on the schedule? I mean, I'm assuming it's Miami, but maybe it could be someone else. What are your thoughts there?
It's definitely Miami at the start of the season because you're getting thrown into the fire of having to go up against a really experienced quarterback in Carson Beck, and that offense is always going to be highly productive, especially throwing the ball. Shannon Dawson is a wizard at calling plays. But at the same time, you get the advantage of taking on the first ever game that they're paired together and they're working together, and there's a lot of receiver turnover there. I think outside of that, though, as I mentioned earlier, like that Texas A&M game, sneaky tough game for them. Notre Dame has the advantage of hosting Texas A&M, so they don't have to deal with the really tense, hostile environment that they saw last year. But with that in mind, there's always a possibility Mike Elko knows the Notre Dame environment well. He's going to know how to attack and be aggressive and, being downhill. And I'm sure more importantly, Elko's probably vindictive enough to know the last two times that he's faced off with Notre Dame, they've fallen short, and he needs to find a way to catch him, especially after losing at home in the way that they did. It was a bit of a disappointment to start their year.
Yeah, I think that talent-wise, A&M is probably by 24/7 Sports team talent composite the most talented team Notre Dame is going to be playing all year. Miami close behind them. USC, Notre Dame has been decisively in the lead under Freeman outside of his first year. It's only been 3 years, though. But I think the schedule's very interesting. I think that the challenges that are presented to this team are unique in a sense because with Mike Denbrock and the O-line they have and the defense and also how they've recruited. They've recruited pretty well at QB. And it's not like Leonard was bad. It's a unique challenge for them, that quarterback room is, but it's nothing that they can't necessarily overcome. Besides Jaden Greathouse, who do you look for to step up at wide receiver? Because they're going to need more than just one good wide receiver or a receiver in general, including tight end.
Yeah, it's promising one that Greathouse finished the year the way that he did and had the amazing performances that he did in the Orange Bowl and the national championship game. Notre Dame can, at least for the first time, look at their receiver room and say, hey, we've got a guy. If he plays to his potential, this could be 1,000-yard receiver. Kind of reminds me of what Will Fuller did not that long ago. But Cam Williams is the next player to pay attention to. He was highly recruited. He's going to be a redshirt freshman this upcoming year. I don't think he really stepped onto the field in any contributions, but there's been nothing but positive buzz for what he can do. He is one of the few guys I think that Notre Dame has had that they've recruited a high-level, highly sought-after receiver and gotten him to sign and join the team. So he's the number one receiver that I would pay the most attention to that is going to emerge. And then outside of that, Jordan Faison, we know that he's shifty and he's quick and he can be a quality impact guy out of the slot. Just don't know if his ceiling goes anything beyond 600, 700 yards and, a couple of big games here and there.
He's just more of an athlete rather than a reliable wide receiver.
Right. Because he's playing lacrosse, so it's kind of hard for a guy like him to really refine the nuances of the position, but he's just so quick and he's a headache and you kind of just deploy him out there and it's like defenses just have to account for him. If you don't, it's damn, that guy just beat us off of a drag route because he's just so much shiftier than our linebackers.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how when the announcers were talking about, I believe it was in the Sugar Bowl that he plays lacrosse, I'm like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense because he is that shifty and quick and elusive. But yeah, I think that ultimately Greathouse is the wide receiver number one. Before I let you go, one last thing is Al Golden left the defense in pretty good shape, but of course you want to make an elite hire at defensive coordinator. Who do you think Notre Dame is going to hire, number one? And number two, who would you like them to hire as the next defensive coordinator?
I wanted them to hire Jim Leonard, the former Wisconsin DC, who's in the NFL right now. One of the most underrated defensive coordinators in the last 5-10 years, possibly.
Yeah, that'd be a home run hire.
But the problem is they're going to hire Chris Ash, who I'm not a very big fan of Chris Ash. Chris Ash has been fine. He's a former head coach at Rutgers. I know a lot of guys that played for his Rutgers program. They didn't exactly give me resounding reviews, so I'll just leave it that way. And at the same time, you look back at the one singular instance that he was a pure defensive coordinator was at the end of Tom Herman's coaching tenure at Texas in 2020, albeit it was during COVID, but they allowed 406 yards per game. That's not a good sign. When he was at Ohio State, when he was highly lauded to be the next Rutgers coach, he was the co-DC, and if I'm correct, I believe he was not even calling plays. He was co-DCing with
Luke
an
Fickell.
actual good coach, Luke Fickell. So
Yes.
there's a lot of context there. I'm not a fan of the if Chris Ash joined the coaching staff as a DB coach, I would be fine with it. But him being the de facto DC, I feel a little off. I would hope at the very least that Mike Mickens and him split duties, and maybe Mickens called. I don't know what the role would be, but I would hope that Mickens has a very hands-on role in the defensive coordinating, and that it's not just straight up Chris Ash.
Yeah, I can see a universe where Freeman would have to begin, babysitting him if the defense wasn't good, and you don't want that. You want your head coach to be a CEO, and I think Freeman is a very. We could be overreacting because it is just 1 year, but we have several games. It's all we have, so why not react to it? Freeman so far looks like a pretty competent CEO, like a really good CEO. So you don't want to take him away from that role. Yeah, I mean, they were in the mix for Jim Knowles. It sounds like Penn State got him, but at the end of the day, based off of what they've spent on Denbrock, they can probably get a lot of different candidates. So hopefully they make the right move for your sake, and also for the fact that I'm inclined to say that they will. And I think this is going to be a really good team entering 2025. I'm picking them in my college football playoff bracket, which will release soon, to go once again to at least the Final Four, like at least to reach the semifinals, because I think they have unparalleled depth at a lot of positions compared to most teams even at their level, like on the O-line, or their DB room and linebacker room's really good. Their running back room's among the best in America, if not the best. So thank you for coming on, Joe. It's always a pleasure. And guys, make sure before we close out here, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, comment your thoughts down below, and do all those things too on the Ruffino and Joe Show. Just look up their YouTube channel and subscribe there. And also follow Joe DeLeone on Twitter. You can even follow me on Twitter. Just look up CFBWSam. You'll find my account. We'll see you guys very soon. Have a great day.